I was dragging here. Thought I would do another upload just because I said I would. I was going to use this portable little mic thing, but it's not charged. So people had an issue with my audio last time. I had some complaints. I sounded scratchy. I do have kind of a scratchy voice, not on purpose. I smoke from hangovers. I don't smoke anymore. But I try to use this mic because it makes it a little easier to hear me. But I did my last videos late at night, and I was trying to be quiet because there was somebody sleeping in the house. So worry about this time being quiet. So I decided, I'm going to tell one of my stories. I have a list here of I've made of stories that I want to tell. Let's see if I can find it. Some of these out. So let's see here. You could probably tell a couple of my smaller stories, maybe. I could tell one of my more dramatic. Yes. Tell the last time I did hallucinogenic mushrooms. This would be 2000 and probably right after 9/11 in 2001 was the last time I did hallucinogenic mushrooms. I've done hallucinogenic mushrooms a handful of times. I wrote about this briefly in my drugs and behavior psychology class, but I didn't give the full story, so I will tell it now. My brother, at this time of my life, I'm pretty sure I was homeless, but my parents left their home in Spring Valley to go somewhere, which was a very rare occasion that my parents left to go on a trip. My younger brother still lived with my parents. He was probably an adult at this point. I don't know. 2001, let's see, 76, 86, 96, 97, 98, 99. So I was 25. So yeah, he was an adult. If in 2001, 76, 86, 96, 96, so 24 would be 2000. I was 25 years old, which means my brother was 22 years old. So he was of drinking age, which is probably why he was 22. So when he left, when my parents left, my brother decided to throw a party because it was rare that my parents ever left to go anywhere because they didn't have a lot of money to ever go on a vacation. So when they did, it was always an opportunity to get buck wild. Buck or butt? No, it's buck. Buck wild. No, or is it buck naked? Butt wild. No, it's not butt wild. That's a whole different connotation. No, but we would get it was an opportunity to get crazy and throw a party. And so my brother threw a party, and I was invited because I was his older brother. Plus, I think I was the one that actually might have hooked up the mushrooms for this party. Because I was older, I had different connections that my younger brother didn't have in different realms. And even though I lived on the streets, I don't know, I might have been working at Hillcrest Cinemas at that point. I worked at Hillcrest Cinemas for over a year. It's just tearing tickets and scooping popcorn for this independent movie theater, Landmark Theaters in Hillcrest, California. I got hired. God, this might actually been around that time, which I was homeless at the end of it, even though I was still working. I was dating this girl named Joanne. I got hired because of the Blair Witch Project, and this is what happens when I tell stories. I end up getting fucking sidetracked in my brain because one story leads to another story. It's a background, but the reason I tell the story is in conjunction to why I was able to get mushrooms. I worked at Hillcrest Cinemas because of the Blair Witch movie project. When that movie, and I had a opal tattoo on my forehead at that point. They needed people to work this movie theater because it was gangbusters. It was an independent film, Blair Witch Project, and there was a lot of people coming every freaking day to see that movie. And the big problem with that movie was that it moved around like I do in my YouTube videos. It was done with a whatever portable camera. It was shot like a real life video camera thing. And because of the fact that the screen wibbled and wobbled and moved around a bunch, people puked. Almost every showing, people vomited in the theater. And that was one of my interview questions, if I was willing to clean up puke. And I was like, sure, I'll clean up puke. I don't care. I I needed money. I think I was probably, really close to being homeless. And at that point, I wasn't getting checks. So I was, living just off my pure wit and charm, which some days was not as much as others. But I got this job working for Hillcrest Cinemas. And I think, and when I got that job, I was able to maintain an apartment for a while in Hillcrest. I need to actually write that down as a whole other story. Maybe next time I'll talk about that apartment because that was wild. But I worked there for a year, and I knew people because I was part of that scene. It was like the hipsters back in the day, in the early 2000s, that worked at the independent movie theater there in Hillcrest. It was all like young, hip, cool kids, and I was a little older than a lot of them, but I still hung out with them, and I had kind of connections between my movie theater people that I knew and my street punks friends that I knew, and my buddy Gazzetti. Like, I knew how to put the word out that I was looking for hallucinogenics, whether it was like LSD or mushrooms, which is the only, I did mescaline once. I did paper acid a few times. I did hallucinogenics probably less than a dozen times total. But this was the last time, this story. So my brother would reach out to me when he was looking for mushrooms. He kind of was kind of like the thing back in the 90s. You couldn't just like go get it like you could nowadays in Colorado because it's legal. You couldn't get anything. Even fucking marijuana was a pain in the ass to get at some points in our life, even in big cities, because we didn't know people, or just it was dry or whatever. Or people were waiting for people to wait for people to wait for people, kind of thing. So I put the fillers out weeks ahead of time because we knew my parents were going to leave, and I got mushrooms. I got us all some mushrooms. And my brother threw this party. He got kegs and beer, and I generally don't mix alcohol and hallucinogenics, but people at the party did, or some people tripped and other people drank. But I think we got 2 kegs, and everybody ended up with like an eighth of mushrooms, or a decent size, like probably about 2 fingers worth of mushrooms in a plastic bag. Um, uh, I didn't hang out with my brother a lot at a certain point. I left my parents' home when I was 15, 14. I think I was 15. I started having problems my freshman year in high school with my family. Just, long stories there, which I'll get into more as I tell my stories. But so I didn't, unfortunately, I wasn't around for my brother's high school years. My parents kicked me out my freshman year of high school, and I lived on the streets most of my time in high school. I went to 5 different high schools, ended up graduating from a very, it's shut down now. I found out thanks to internet searching that the high school I graduated from shut down due to lack of funds. It was called the Toussaint Teen Center, and it was run by St. Vincent de Paul out of San Diego. St. Vincent de Paul was a Catholic like charity homeless shelter that was right downtown from the trolley, like the first stop downtown after you took the trolley in past the zoo and past all the places. The first like stop downtown, you get off the trolley and you could walk like 5-6 blocks up, and that was the St. Vincent de Paul, which was like a missionary for homeless people. But the guy that his wife actually died, St. Vincent, and it was his wife, or the Joan Croc. I forget, the Joan Croc St. Vincent de Paul, something along the lines. It was a McDonald's tycoon that died, and he left a bunch of money to his wife, and he was a greedy fuck from what I understand. But his wife was a philanthropist, and she opened up this homeless shelter, and then they took St. Vincent de Paul was an out. It was that the school I went to was like a division of that was for homeless teenagers, for runaways, or for kids that were living on the streets that they were trying to get off the streets, put in this facility, and get through high school. So. And I don't even know how I got on this subject. Well, anyways, I wasn't around for my brother in his high school. I was already on the streets. I was already living my life. I was working. I worked a job. I worked 2 jobs my freshman year. I worked at a pizza place, Luigino's Italian Restaurante, and I worked at Top Flight Comics in Lemon Grove, California. Those are the 2 things I did. The Top Flight Comics job was just more like I was working for comics for free, and I would go in there and they would let me stand behind the counter and feel like a big shot, but I was just a 15-year-old kid, wet behind the ears kind of situation. But so this party that happened, I got mushrooms for everybody, and my brother's crew. I was friends with them, but I was an outsider because I was older, and I didn't hang with them. My brother lived with my parents until he was practically fucking married. He at one point he bought a motorhome and lived in the backyard. And then when he did move out, it was to go to college in Colorado after he was married. Like he was already had a partner and all that. His wife, Chastity, who was the biggest fucking waste of human space ever existed. She brought my, I mean, she kind of ruined my brother's life in some ways and vice versa. But make a long story short, which I never do, to make this story not include that story, which I will talk about, I'm sure, and I have actually. My brother's story is on YouTube. I wrote that down and tried to read it at one point. It's super long. If you ever care or want to read it, want to hear it. So this time that I did mushrooms, I had done mushrooms before. All hallucinogenics back in the day were you never knew what you were getting into. Like you just never fucking knew. I was always a little trepidatious to do mushrooms because, or any hallucinogenics, because sometimes it was really good and sometimes it sucked ass. Like the first time I did hallucinogenics was paper acid. I was homeless at the time. I was homeless, but I was couch surfing, and I was staying with a high school teacher my freshman year named Sam. His buddy Marlon and his buddy Marlon's friend Ryan had a crash. They had a pad off of 42nd Street in San Diego, which 42nd Street in San Diego back then was a shithole. Like it was scary. It was fucking like, you know, guerrilla warfare scary. Like just getting there, I was always a little nervous to get off the bus and walk over to this place, but their place was like a compound. It had like 14-foot high fences all around it, and once you got into where they stayed, you were pretty much shut out from the outside world. So once you got over there, it was fine. And there was like 2 apartments, and Ryan and Marlon had rooms, and they let me sleep on the couch. And Marlon was dating this. Oh God, what was her name? I think. Man, what was her name? I can't remember her name. It's been 30 years since this happened. So Marlon, and oh man, she was beautiful. I remember what she looked like though. She looked like Egyptian princess or something. Like she was just gorgeous, like drop dead gorgeous. And she's the one that gave me the hit of acid. I remember. I mean, she was in her 20s. I was 15. Marlon he was working a catering job, so he'd bring home alcohol like champagne from these big fancy catering jobs. Ryan was a trust fund baby. Like he was just a privileged fucking whiny ass. You know, he was fun to hang out with, but I got to know him later, and he was just a big baby. He always had money and privilege, so he had that entitlement attitude early on. Um, I was just a kid. Like I realize now looking back and meeting 15-year-olds as an adult, like I was just a kid. I thought I was an adult. I thought I had everything figured out, but I didn't have a fucking clue. I didn't even have I didn't even have the period under the clue. I didn't have nothing. I didn't even know. I didn't even know what the fuck was going on. I had a lot of anger and I had a lot of fucking bitterness already at that point and a lot of trauma, but I didn't have a clue onto what I was doing with my life. So, that was the first time I did acid. It was great. Like the first time I did hallucinogenic, it was great. Like I did it at this crash pad. Marlon was a sculptor and an artist. Ryan, like I said, he had money, so the whole inside of the living room. There was 2 big L couches, and they smoked a lot of weed. You know, which half the reason I was there half the time is because somebody was always packing a bowl. And he had a sound system that was set up all around the living room. Ryan had set up, and there's nothing like listening to Pipers at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd while fucking tripping on mushrooms, you know, after smoking a couple bowls in your teenage years. Like, shit was mind blowing. Like, he introduced me to all kinds of music I never heard. So did Sam. That was one of the best things Sam ever gave me. He introduced me to Tom Waits, he introduced me to the Pogues. Just really good music that I had never heard before that. You know, I was on the mainstream pop music of Huey Lewis and the News before that. You know, I never heard of the Pogues or Tom Waits or, you know, I'd heard Nirvana and some of the mainstream stuff, but I was getting exposed to different things. But the first time I did hallucinogenics was at that place where it was full of artists, and it was just environment where I knew I could crash. And they were going to let me stay there. They allowed, you know, I knew it was relatively safe. So I ended up taking this acid and sitting next to this gorgeous just gorgeous woman who would have probably, you know, she was Marlon's girlfriend, but she was super nice to me, and I loved her. Like I was enamored by her. I wouldn't say I loved her, but I lusted for her, not love, because she was so fucking gorgeous and so nice to me, and I wasn't used to that. But I did acid, and all I did is sit next to her for hours, and she had this tackle box thing of beads and little fabric and foam and shit, and she would hand me one bead at a time, and I would, you know, bead, I would analyze it, and then I'd hand it back to her, and then she'd hand me another one, and this went on for an infinity. And the whole inside of the house was wood, so everything had eyes. Everything had the eye knots, the knots of wood, and there was art everywhere because Marlon was an artist, she was an artist, Brian was a pseudo artist, and so there was like illustrations and sculpting and all this really visual stuff everywhere. And like Marlon had Italian training background for sculpting, so he could sculpt like fucking Michelangelo back in the day. Like the dude had two bookends that he sculpted out of marble that were hands, like forearms that were like from the elbow on, that held these books that were perfectly with the veins and everything. He was very very talented. He was a shithead. He was a heroin addict, piece of shit later, and violent, but that's another story. Um, But that first trip, man, it was amazing. Is the point I'm trying to make with this whole story about tripping with Ryan and Marlon and his girl. God, I feel like it started with an S, like Samantha, but I don't think it was. It was Marlon, and it'll come to me later. It's amazing I can remember anything at this point. Um, but I ended up getting in a car accident with her. I used to ride around with her. Like I don't know how I ended up going along with people sometimes. Like some of my memories are just, they're kind of chaotic because of I was all over the place in San Diego County and homeless. Like I don't have a lot of context for some of the things that happened to me because I don't remember what happened before and after. I just remember the intensity of situations. So like the first time I did that was super intense, and I was a freshman. I was 15, and it was a wonderful experience. It was beyond mind blowing because like to see things move, like to see these hands like flex, and to see the eyes on the wall like, and every bead was like glowing and like connected to the universe, and just all this shit that was going on, man, in my head between that and the stuff I was reading and the drawing I was doing. And it was just, it was at that moment in my life, it was life changing. And so that first experience doing drugs kind of tainted me a little bit because it was wonderful. Now, I can't say every experience after that with hallucinogenics was the same. I had a lot of really fucked up nightmarish situations because of the context of doing the drugs where I was doing them, or the situation I was in where how safe I felt. How safe I felt. I, I would do drugs. I would do hallucinogenics sometimes and not know how strong they were. Or I would go looking for acid down at the beach and find acid, take it. Nothing would happen, which means you got hustled. Sometimes you get bunk acid, or some asshole on the beach would be selling fake acid or just paper that he was saying was acid, charge you $5 a hit, and fucking take your $10 for the 2 hits and then disappear, and you never see him again. And you take him and fucking nothing would happen. And be like, oh, I got ripped off. So you never knew if what you were getting was real. You never knew how strong it was. There'd be times I would take acid and then it wouldn't work, and I would look for some more, find some more, take it, and then the first shit would kick in. Like, just, mistakes that you make when you're young. But I did mushrooms. The last time I did hallucinogenics was mushrooms that I got, and I hooked them up from Gazzetti, I believe. And the story of getting them is a story too. Like, I guess I could tell. I could add. Yeah, why not? It's part of the story. Um, I went to go hook up the mushrooms from my buddy Gazzetti. My brother went with me, and one-eyed Matt went with me. Matt, long-haired metalhead. There was my brother. Matt was one of his like main crew members of his like homies, and Matt had a car, so we always utilized Matt for everything because he had a big old caddy boat thing. Like, I don't know if it was a Cadillac, but it was close. It was like a big fucking boat. You could fit, 3 or 4 people in the back seat and 2 people in the front seat comfortably. And so that day, we went to hook up mushrooms, and I had to meet Gazzetti in North Park, sketch area of San Diego back in the day. I don't know, it's probably been gentrified at this point, but the, the, Gazzetti came over to the window. I gave him the money. He said, "I'll be right back." He had, he had to get the money first because he was the middleman. I was like middleman and a middleman and a middleman kind of thing. So like, I had to meet up my brother, Matt, me. I think Jesse was there too. I think there was 4 of us in the car. Like Matt and my brother in the front seat, and I was in the back seat with Jesse. Gazzetti came over the window. My brother rolled down the window. We gave him the money. Gazzetti said literally, "I'll be right back." He said like 2 words. "Thanks, I'll be right back." I don't even think he said thanks. He just took the money. He said, "I'll be back." He took off. So we're waiting for Gazzetti to get back for the mushrooms, to get back with the mushrooms. And we're sitting there on the street just waiting. There's 4 guys just sitting in a car waiting to fucking, get drugs, basically. Illegal drugs in San Diego in 2001. While we're waiting, a police officer pulls up in front of us. Like not right in front of us, but on the same block and parks. Gets out of the car and goes to this house. And Matt starts freaking out. Always a little lily-livered. He had a glass eye, so we made fun of him. Like my crew was mean. Like back in the day, everybody was mean to one another, and the more fucking weird and the more disabled, the more we were toxic. 90s fucking people. Like we were mean to each other. It was our language of love in a way. It sucked. It wasn't nice. But everybody was mean to Matt and made fun of him because of his one eye. They made fun of him a lot, and he was a nice guy too. And that was the thing. Like he was super nice, and everybody took advantage of that because he came from privilege. He had parents that were supportive, and he had money. So, and he hung out on the trail. I don't even know how they even met Matt. He ended up becoming a born-again Christian later and gave up. He wanted to get away from all the people that we hung out with. And I don't blame him because they were really shitty to him. And I asked him why. he said he was just tired of hanging out with assholes and wanted to hang out with better people. And he was hoping Christians would, be better. So we're sitting there. This cop pulls up. Matt starts freaking out a little bit. He's like, "Oh my God, they know, man. They know they're here to, we're going to go to jail." I'm like, "Dude, just shut up, man. They ain't no fucking, they're here for something totally unrelated. Like, don't stress." Like, and we're waiting because Eddie ain't coming back. We're waiting. And then pretty soon, another fucking cop comes. And this time, he parks behind us. And he doesn't get out of the car. And Matt's losing his shit. Matt is he's moving around at this point. He's bouncing around. He's freaking out. He's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to go to jail. I can't go to jail. I you need to fucking calm the fuck down. First of all, you're moving so much, the car's bouncing around. You're going to attract attention by being a fucking dumb shit." And then he just kept getting like aggro. And I finally grabbed him I was in the backseat. I grabbed by his shoulder. I was like, "Matt, if you don't calm the fuck down right now, I'm going to knock your ass out, bitch. Because I'm not going to jail because you're attracting attention of the cops by moving this car. You're going to get us in trouble because you're fucking attracting attention." And so he calmed down. Gazzetti walked up to the door. Brother rolled down the window, handed us the drugs, and we drove away. It was just, I never forgot it because, we all were a little paranoid, but 2 cops on 1 block was not an uncommon thing in San Diego County. Like, and they weren't even there for us. They didn't care, They didn't care about us. They didn't know what we were doing. That was just all our paranoia and our imagination. Anyways, that's how I remember that specific time of getting those drugs because Matt, man, he was bouncing around and his car was moving and I was worried and everybody was worried. And ironically, we ended up getting the drugs and just driving away like nothing happened. So, but, we get later on, we got the party, got the keg, everything's going. Everybody's there. Big Robert was there. Matt was there. Chassie was there. My brother's future wife. People I didn't know, just people, I don't think Brandon showed up because I don't know. Anyways, there was a lot of people there. I didn't live there. My brother lived there. But I had kind of like my own little room because it was my former room. And my parents had their bedroom, and there was a 3-bedroom house, so there was 1 extra room that I could kind of claim when I stayed that night that this is where I'm crashing. This is my place. This is my sanctuary. And that my brother was into metal, like fucking heavy metal. That's all he ever listened to was Pantera, Sepultura, that became Soulfly. Megadeth was a big fucking Slayer, all that shit. Like that's all they listened to is metal. System of the Down, like all that shit. I don't even know if System of the Down was out in 2001, but I think it was. So this party was, it was loud, and there was a bunch of people drinking and doing hallucinogenics and smoking weed, and it was in Spring Valley, which the reason why I left Spring Valley when I did, I saw two drive-by shootings in a 1 week period out the back of this fucking this fence. But it was a rough area, so nobody cared. Like if we were throwing a party, like they probably had like literal homicides that were being committed, blocks away that they were dealing with. And actually, that particular neighborhood, Spring Valley, California, the one time I was trying to get back to a place where I was staying, and they locked down. I've never seen this shit except for in San Diego County. They locked down a whole fucking block and had like choppers and like SWAT team. I mean, they would lock down city blocks if something was going down in San Diego where you couldn't come in and out of a city block till they found who they were looking for. I remember one time in Spring Valley they did that, and that shit was intense to try to get somewhere and realize, oh, I ain't going in there till this shit clears up. Like, so Spring Valley sucked. It was like Tweakerville. It was a rough area of San Diego. I'm sure it's super fucking expensive now. I'm sure that home my parents had, they should have held on to till yesterday. It's probably a $5 billion home or some shit, 5 million or something. They sold it, moved to Colorado, but so I did. Just setting the background of the environment, like the intensity of the party. Like there's a lot of people, a lot of music. They had those. Somebody had got a hold of like those July 4th fucking sparklers and was doing them in the house. Like it was like a rave metal fucking. It was insane. And I made tea. I was like, okay, I'm gonna make mushroom tea and drink it. So I boiled the water, put the fucking mushrooms in it, and decided that's how I extract the hallucinogenics from mushrooms. Because I didn't like eating them. Sometimes eating mushrooms would make you. I just didn't like the way they taste, and I didn't want to barf. So I just soaked them in tea. I took the whole bag, dumped it in fucking, and made this big thing of tea and drank it all. And then, you wait whenever you do hallucinogenics, you're waiting for it to kick in. And holy shit, man, it started kicking in. It started kicking in strong. Like I cannot tell you. Like it was so fucking intense that I went to the bathroom to go pee, and this is when it got even. It turned into a nightmare. Um, the bathroom to go pee. My parents, the bathroom in that hallway, it was like a hallway bathroom. So it was like a hallway. There's a sink on the right, toilet all the way at the end, and the tub. And it was a hallway kind of situation. In fact, I don't even think there was a tub now that I recollect. I think their shower was in the other bathroom in this. Yeah, no, I don't think there was a tub. I think it was only a toilet and a sink in that bathroom. But my recollection of that bathroom isn't perfect, but I do remember it enough to know that when I went in there, I had to go pee. I went pee, and when I was done peeing, I turned around to leave the hallway bathroom, and my vision just went like it. I literally blacked out while I was walking. Like I could not fucking the hallucinogenics, like just that all the fucking bright lights of hallucinogenic power, like all the fucking just starry lights just came in, and then it just tunnel visioned me out, and I fucking blacked out, and I couldn't. I got so disoriented, I couldn't tell which way I was fucking going or walking, and I fell down and I hit my head on the sink fucking cabinet thing while I was trying to leave the bathroom. And that set me up for a horrific trip because I hit my head so hard that I could feel a fucking lump on my head. And so I went back into my room and I had convinced myself that I'd given myself brain damage or a tumor or, whatever, that I'd concussed myself and was fucking dying. Like I was bleeding in my skull inside my brain. Die. There was just no way out of it. I was just gonna fucking hallucinate alone in this room and die. And so I call it a death trip because I literally went through the mental process of realizing I was gonna die, reliving my worst and most powerful regrets and sins, thinking about them, realizing, how connected I was to the city, how connected I was to the world, how connected I was to everything. kind of just got into a fetal position and just laid there going, convincing myself my death was imminent. And it got super intense where I could hear the mechanisms of the city. I don't know how else to describe this, but and I've learned this in other ways in my travels that cities have a fucking spirit. Cities have a mechanism. They have a gear to them. They're not all the same. But I could feel the like praying mantis reptilian fucking bug overlords of San Diego County, of this particular part of San Diego County, and just the tentacle tendrils of just connection that it had in me from living on these streets for so many years in the city, and what it done to my soul, and just the fucking clinging to me that it had done. And I think this is probably why I ended up leaving shortly after, was because of this trip. It was shortly after that I decided to just throw everything away. I set my punk rock jacket on fire in a fire pit down in Ocean Beach, and I just fucking threw a dart at a map and ended up going to Fargo, North Dakota after pretty much giving up everything, giving away the little material possessions I had at that point. Bought a new jacket, and I got on a Greyhound bus and went to Fargo, North Dakota. I don't know what the fuck I was doing, but I knew I had to get out of San Diego after 9/11 and after this trip. But it was very intense, and it was scary, and it was, it made me think about a lot of the things I had done. So it was a horrible trip, but it was good, I guess, in the bigger picture of things. It made me quit doing drugs. I remember after I did that, I didn't want to do drugs anymore. I didn't want to. I don't think I've never done hallucinogenics since then. So it's been 24 years since I did 24 years since I did hallucinogenics, mushrooms, any for that matter. I mean, I've hallucinated since then from lack of sleep and other things. Drinking too much coffee. Coffee can be hallucinogenic if you don't sleep enough and you drink too much of it, I've learned. But I never purposely tried to hallucinate doing street hallucinogenics or anything like that. And as the trip went on, you start to recover, and my brother's parties always. My brother and me had issues with wanting to escape because of our traumatic upbringing and just childhood and religious and all that shit that we were pumped full of. Like we would push that we always we were very competitive. I think we had a normal. I think our amygdalas were oversized and our testosterone was over fucking hyped, and so we always felt like everything was competition. I'm very competitive, not to a good, and not in a good way. Like whether it was drinking or fucking or fighting, like we always had to be the best or the most, and it it was hard on us. It was bad for us the way that we approached life. And so this party towards the end of the night, of course, got louder and crazier and fucking. At one point, my brother was screaming to play. I'll never forget. I want to play Scrabble for blood. Like he got so fucked up, and which always happened. I would try to kind of rein in my inebriated state because I knew my brother was gonna not, and he was scary. My brother was a big guy. He was 6'2". He looked like he had a long red beard, like a not just beard, but like neck beard. My brother had this fucking growth of red hair that just, and he had long red hair and just ugly, mean, and not afraid to fucking intimidate you. Like that was the only go-to thing he had, was he was intimidating. And he knew it, and he liked to fight. He enjoyed hurting people. He enjoyed mosh pits. He enjoyed knocking people out. He enjoyed scaring people. Um, he was much more violent and had a proclivity for violence than I did. I avoided that shit because I didn't like involuntary pain. I liked voluntary pain, like tattoos and piercings, but I didn't like somebody hurting me. I tried to avoid it. So as the night went on, I mean, more people left, and I came down a little bit. You always like trip really hard, and then you finally get to sleep, and it's always a fucking relief. Like that was one of the trips of. There's been quite a few trip, quite a more than probably more than half the times I hallucinated, I regretted it. Um, a lot of times the paper acid you would get, I stopped doing paper acid long before I stopped doing mushrooms because you get the first time I did paper acid, it was great, and we'd get liquid acid sometimes. They put it on a sugar cube, like a drop or two on a sugar cube, and you take it. And I learned to be a little careful with the dosage, where you know I don't think my brother didn't have a bad trip until he was way older and in Colorado as an adult, and then he finally had a bad trip, and then he told me, he's like, I finally understand your hesitation, because he had a trip where one of his friend Robert, who's an ex-con, another long story there, but his friend Robert turned into like this Aztec fucking warrior blood god, and like it turned out to be a nightmare for him. He never had a bad trip until he had tripped many times. Then he finally had one, and he remember him telling me he finally understood my hesitation to indulge in hallucinogenics, because for him they were always just fun. Like to him it was just like a fucking carnival ride at a circus. So he would do hallucinogenics whenever he could, any chance he got to take acid, mushrooms, pretty much any drug. Like I never did cocaine. I never touched cocaine because I knew it was addictive, and I just was scared of powder. I sniffed heroin once. Didn't like it. It made me speedy. Made my friend Gazzetti got it for me again. My buddy Gazzetti, who almost. But that's a story I will be telling on YouTube. But anyways, it's just one of my stories I wanted to share about, hallucinogenics and taking mushrooms. The last time I did in San Diego and Spring Valley at a party that my brother threw, and how it fucked me up. It changed the course of my existence there. I'm pretty sure that was the catalyst that made me want to leave San Diego. I got tired of everything with my brother had to involve drugs. Like we couldn't. I remember the first Spider-Man movie way back then. The was out, and I wanted to go see it, and we all had planned to go see this movie, and we'd planned like we were set at a time we were going to go, but we couldn't go because my brother couldn't get fucking weed. Like just remember one particular day sitting in the backyard of my brother's. I wasn't allowed to be at my parents' house, but I would sneak in the backyard and stay and hide out in his motorhome because he wasn't. My parents had this weird thing. Like they kicked me out of the house when I was 15 for reading comic books because my mom thought I was bringing demons into the house through my comic books, because I literally had the DC comic called The Demon, and my mom was very religious. So when she saw this fucking, yellow and red fucking demon on the cover with the issue number one, The Demon, I worked at a comic book store. She was convinced that I was literally bringing in spiritual entities into the fucking house, which is ridiculous. And that's one of the things that got me kicked out, is that my mom, without asking me, went and threw away a box of comics about this big that were my number one issues and my first appearances. And, we're talking early 90s. I started seeking out first appearances when I worked at Rocket Raccoon number one, shit like that. You know what I mean? The first appearance of Rocket Raccoon in the Incredible Hulk. It's shit that years later they turn into movies. My mom didn't care. She just threw this whole box of comics away because she was convinced I was bringing demons into the house. And that's one of the things that fucked me up about high school, my freshman year, because that's what I was working for. I wasn't paid in money. I was paid in product. And so, she threw away my comics, and it just turned into this thing. And like, but my brother, he, you know, he stayed at my parents, and I would go in the backyard and hang out with him. But I just got to a point where I was tired of fucking being around a bunch of Jonesers. Like, I like to smoke weed, but if I couldn't get weed, I didn't worry about it like he did. And he was super addicted to it, like to the point where he needed it to be stable. If he didn't have it, he would get angry. He was physically dependent on fucking marijuana. He smoked so much of it. And it wasn't like now where you get a prescription, you can line it up, you can measure the THC levels. Like we never knew what we were getting. We didn't know the strength. Sometimes you get shit that was garbage. Sometimes we get oily weed. Being in San Diego was coming across the border, so it was always like brick form. I was always fucking rolling a 20-sided dice, 100 million-sided dice, really. But he, I remember this particular time where I was waiting to go to this movie, and they couldn't leave because every 5 minutes he had to call his drug dealer. And, I mean, he made me look mild in his tenacity and ability to bug people. Like, you would just eventually do what you wanted with him because you were sick of fucking being bugged. A skill we both kind of had. But I decided to leave San Diego after that particular Saturday, waiting in this motorhome it was during the summer. It's the summer blockbuster Spider-Man movie I wanted to go see, and I missed the showing because him and Chastity and I forget who else is there. Jesse probably, or one of the other clown friends. They just could not go and enjoy a movie unless they were fucking stoned out of their mind. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't eat. They couldn't do anything unless they had drugs. And like, I like drugs too back then. Don't get me wrong, but I wasn't gonna miss a movie because I wasn't able to get high beforehand, and that was the only context they could do anything. They had to get high first, or it just wasn't as good. And I got sick of that shit, and I decided to leave it all behind. And I left San Diego after that nightmarish trip and that one particular Saturday of watching. I was just tired of hanging out with Jonesers. Like that's what they did. They Jones. They sat around and Jonesed all the fucking time. Like once they had weed, it was fine, but then they smoked it as fast as they got it, and then as soon as they were out, it was like on to Jonesville again. And nothing lamer than sitting around a fucking hot motor home on a Saturday afternoon during the summer in Spring Valley, California, waiting for fucking drug deal to go down that you don't give a shit about just because you want to enjoy a movie with your so-called family and friends. So that's one of the reasons I left San Diego. That's one of the reasons why I stopped doing drugs. But I was a little addicted to marijuana too. I remember when I got to Fargo, I didn't know anybody, and I followed this crazy guy around all day one day just because of the promise he said he'd get me high. Like, he'd smoke weed with me, and I didn't know. I should tell that story. I write that story down. I got a list of stories that I tell that I want to tell just because my life has been wild and crazy and scary, and I've made it this far, and it's amazing. And a list of all the different situations and stories, like um, just things, and there's a lot of stories, a lot of things I've been through. I'm hoping to get some of this stuff out and then take these videos and feed them into something that can turn it into a transcript and then clean it up and type it up, or to where it's a little more readable and understandable and a little more coherent and not just a rambling and blah. So let me know if you enjoyed that. I don't know. I'll probably title this one a little differently. Um, Cross this off my list now. I'm gonna try to tell some more stories on this list, and if you enjoyed this, let me know. Uh, Maybe use the phrase. I would love it if people would watch to the end and enjoy these enough to leave me a comment, which I used to get, but I'm trying to rebuild my YouTube channel. So if you watch this to the end and you enjoyed it and you'd like me to do more, put in a comment, one-eyed Matt. Like I will know that you watched this to the end. So if you put in the comment, one-eyed Matt, it will bring me much joy to know that somebody watched it to the fucking end, and I'm not just talking to myself, self-therapizing as I call it in my last video. So that being said, thank you all for your time. I don't know if you got anything from this other than just another crazy guy on YouTube, but I'm trying to share. That's all I have. I have no wisdom. I have no accomplishments. I'm a failed artist. I'm a failed tattoo artist. I'm almost a failed student because I almost want to quit every semester by the end. If I wouldn't have met the wonderful wife that I'd met, I'd probably leave this life thinking I was a failed human. But I did at least one thing. I met a beautiful, wonderful, supportive wife, and she's the reason why I try so hard, because I don't want to feel like a complete fucking failure. Doing this YouTube thing just to try to connect in some way to humanity. I've been very, I don't know, isolated here in Kansas, and lately realizing I'm irrelevant now. I'm okay. I'm almost okay with it. I don't need to be relevant. Who gives a shit? You get what you give, and I guess I didn't give enough to get. So that's how I feel. Like I would like to give more. This is my attempt. Just all I have is my stories now. I don't have what else. I mean, I could draw some pictures, but there's a 12-year-old out there doing it way better than me now. So all I have is my stories, you know, and they're sadly funny, is what I like to say. A lot of my stories, because to me they bring me sadness, but they're absurd. The absurdity of a lot of things that I've been through is beyond. You cannot not say it's absurd, because it's absurd. My life in general. I guess that would be the theme of it, absurdness. So, so that's it. That's all I'm going to say this round. I hope you all having a great day out there on YouTube, and let's keep it under 46 minutes. So have a great day.